Greetings. I am Wendell Griffin, pastor of Millennium Church, and this is our 2020 Good Friday Tenebrae service. Like many congregations, our congregation is not worshiping in our sacred space. And so this video recording is being prepared in order to allow you, the general public, as well as the members of our congregation, to worship as we would worship on Good Friday and have the experience of our space and familiar sights and sounds to guide and encourage the worship service. Let us share in the invocation. We veil our faces before your glory, O holy and immortal one, and bow before the cross of your wounded Christ. With angels and archangels, we praise you, our mercy, and we bless you, our compassion. For in our brokenness you have not abandoned us. Hear us as we pray through Jesus, our high priest. Heal all division, reconcile the estranged, console the suffering, and raise up to new life all that is bound by death. Amen. Our hymn is When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. Our musicians will play it. If you have the words, you may sing along in your own homes as they play. They will play all 4 stanzas. your son embraced death even as he had embraced life, faithfully and with good courage. Grant that we who have been born out of his wounded side may hold fast to our faith in him, exalted, and may find mercy in all times of need. Amen. The first reading, the Shadow of Betrayal, Matthew 26, verses 20 to 25, from the New Revised Standard Version. When it was evening, he took his place with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me." And they became greatly distressed and began to say to him one after another, "Surely not I, Lord." He answered, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him. But woe to that one by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for him that one not to have been born." Judas, who betrayed him, said, "Surely not I, Rabbi." He replied, "You have said so." God, have mercy. And now you repeat after me, Christ, have mercy. The shadow of inner agony. Luke chapter 22, verses 39 through 44. He came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them for about a stone's throw, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel then from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground. God, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. The shadow of loneliness. Matthew 26, verses 40 through 45. Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So, could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again, he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. God, have mercy." And you repeat, "Christ, have mercy." The Shadow of Desertion. Matthew 26, verses 47 through 50, and 55 and 56. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place, so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled. God, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. The shadow of accusation. Matthew 26, verses 59 through 67. Now, the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days." The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus said to him, You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict? They answered, He deserves death. Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him. God, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. The shadow of mockery. Mark chapter 15, verses 12 through 20. Pilate spoke to them again. Then what do you wish me to do with the man you call the King of the Jews? They shouted back, Crucify him! Pilate asked them, Why? What evil has he done? But they shouted all the more, Crucify him! So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them. And after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers led him into the courtyard of the palace, that is, the governor's headquarters. And they called together the whole court, and they clothed him in a purple cloak. And after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on him. And they began saluting him. Hail, King of the Jews! They struck his head with a reed, spat upon him, and knelt down in homage to him. After mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. God, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. The shadow of death. Luke 23, verses 32 through 46. 2 others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by, watching. But the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." The soldiers also mocked him, coming up and offering him sour wine, and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who was hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of death? And indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. God, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. And now, Ms. Boyle's Minister Pettigrew will play our last hymn, "Were You There When They Crucified My Lord?" We will sing, they will play all the stanzas, all 5 stanzas. beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light has come into the world, but people love the shadows rather than the light. Please take your leave from this service in silence. We will relight the Christ candle at the beginning of worship on Easter to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Go in peace.